Disruptors and curious minds. What's happening, everybody? Hope everyone's doing well. Welcome to another episode of Thinking on Paper, your weekly dive into emerging tech and the intersection of culture. Mark Fielding is in Italy today, the world traveler. What's happening? You jumped in some cold water today, I hear.
Yeah, I'm in Italy. I've been mainlining Italian coffee and an Italian ice cream for 4 days now, actually. So I'm a bit scatterbrained. It's like the coffee and the ice cream are working in friction against each other. And here's my Italian son.
Love it. Amazing. Amazing. So funny you mentioned coffee. I had an interesting coffee experience this morning. I have
Oh,
one of
yes.
those Nespresso machines that makes like the
Yeah.
foam on top. It's kind of bougie coffee that I got yanked into, but I can't seem to disconnect myself from now. We've had bugs actually make a little home inside our Nespresso machine. So I opened my coffee and had like 3 or 4 bugs floating in it. And I was like, okay, I could do one of two things, be really grossed out or scoop the bugs out and drink my coffee. I ended up opting for new coffee. But anyway, we're remedying the situation. I feel good. You're feeling good. This week,
Sorry, but if that's not a reason to get rid of your Nespresso machine and get a decent cafetiere or a French press or something, I don't know what is.
Okay, touche. Excellent. So onward, everybody. So today we're super excited to have a high level conversation about things that are innate to humans and how that translates down and trickles into what's happening in emerging tech and specifically Web3. We've got a gentleman that's going to join us here in a second that I'll let him dive into introductions. But like many of our guests, there's an interdisciplinary nature to him, right, Mark? I mean, we're seeing that as a thread in a lot of the people that we're talking to. Why do you think that? Why do you think this particular emerging tech Web3 world is full of interdisciplinarians?
In a word, curiosity. I would imagine. I get like there's something that fuels the innate curiosity to apply what we know to other industries, to other verticals, to other domains. I mean, we can ask Kimani about it, why he thinks that is. I'd be interested on his take, but I think it is very kind of simplistic level. It's that.
That makes sense. And I'm driven a lot by my curiosity, which leads me into a lot of the different worlds that I explore. So that's probably spot on. Well, without further ado, and we'll go into all the interconnections that we teed up there. But I want to welcome our guest, Kimani Okearah, and let him introduce himself a little bit, and then we can dive in. Kimani, how are you, sir?
Hello,
Welcome.
everybody. How's everybody going today?
Man,
Excellent.
I am doing well. I hope everyone in the chat is doing well. We hopefully will. Oh, we're already starting to see some action. All right. So tell us how you guys are feeling and what's happening. Kimani joins us from the West Coast, so it's really early out there. We appreciate you being here. Let's start off with a quick little background. What I always like to do, Kimani, is like this interdisciplinary thing. You know, tell me the beats of your story, so to speak, and how all of these disciplines kind of interconnected into your experience today, right? So we have the photography piece, we have the production piece, we have the cognitive linguist piece, which is by far the most fascinating to me.
Yeah.
Give us a little tee up of that and how those points of connection kind of lead you to what you're doing today. And we'll dive into the more specifics.
Awesome. Well, this actually starts with sort of a deep cut. I was born on crack cocaine in 1989, and I have a severe disability because of that. It's not too squeamish, but I'll show you. I'm all cut up here,
Wow.
here, all up in here, all up over there. And they've tried to, get in there with 6 different surgeries and rearrange things and try to make paralyzed parts of my intestines work. Things that are too small, bigger. It's a mess. So because I was born on crack, the state of California took me from my biological family at 6 months old and put me into what's called the foster system. And right before I turned 2, I was adopted and put into an evangelical family up in Forest Hill, California, a really small town. And there I enjoyed a warm, privileged childhood. No complaints or anything. It was just sort of like the Truman Show, because the day I turned 18, I got kicked out. And I was a good kid, didn't do didn't smoke weed like I do now. Didn't do a 3-sport athlete. I've met all the benchmarks, as I say, but the contract ended, got kicked out 3 a.m. I turned 18. And that for me was like the Truman Show. And it took me a few years to realize that, but that was the Truman Show moment. And then I met my biological family at 19. And, for their side of things, it was a super traumatic experience for the state to come in and take a child away. And so that was important for me to understand that I was not rescued, I was trafficked. And that was a very important thing for me to understand, that the state is directly involved in that, how much money was produced for me being taken out of the home. $250,000 of economy is produced every time the state takes a child out of the home. So it's very much done deliberately. California produces twice as many foster kids as any other state in America. So, this is not a system for saving or rescuing people. It's a system that people are getting paid off of, and nobody's paying attention to it. So, and it just goes to show you, when I met my biological family, that was a fun journey. I found some paperwork from the adoption cycle that had my older sister's name on it. So I found her on MySpace back then. And so I messaged her, and then she calls me that night, the next day, just blows up my phone. It's like, you have no idea how long we've been looking for you, all this stuff. So then she gives me the names of my other siblings. I have 2 younger sisters and a younger brother, and I found them all on social media too. Facebook was really helpful with that. It was 2009. So people were all getting on Facebook now. And then we all went bowling. I met my grandmother, my Uncle Robert Earl, my Uncle Melvin, my Auntie Tracy, Auntie Brenda, Auntie Nisi, all these family members in my biological family. It turns out my grandmother, Barbara, her uncle is Robert Earl Jones, the pioneer of the second wave of Hollywood. So I found that out at 19. And so imagine you meet your biological family, your grandma tells you, I'm James Earl Jones' cousin, right? And you're like, bullshit. That's not true. But it turns out it's exactly true. And now the entire family is like, we're going through a synthesis generational shift right now. And people are worried because there's not a lot of platform for everybody. And that's a little bit odd, considering the legacy that, the two pioneers in Hollywood that definitely paved streets for the next wave. And the families are not shored up, not stabilized, nothing. Not to say anything about James or his specific situation. I'm saying everybody else. So I found that out at 19. And then I moved to Los Angeles after I graduated UC Santa Cruz with my degrees and I had a phonetic analysis degree in linguistics and a bachelor's in production, and it was called film digital media production. So I go down to LA, start producing for the Young Turks there for just under a year. And then I learned a lot about LA production culture. Now, shout out to Young Turks. No, I didn't go down to LA saying, oh, I'm James Earl Jones' grandnephew. Didn't do any of that. Anybody who's got that clout in their back pocket can go there and get into parties and ride the system like that. But we're storytellers, and in my opinion, I'm a foster kid from a small town in Northern California. The James Earl Jones thing is a fun fact. It's not something that shaped my identity as a human being. So to me, using that as clout currency, at least early in now I'm 33, so we have, I understand after my grandmother told me before she passed, you have to use what you can to stand out in this world. And so people remember you at least. And that's a pretty big chip for people to remember you. So
you're related to Darth Vader.
Yeah, Vader blood. That's what we say in the family. Vader blood. So and the flip side of that is there's so many Star Wars fans that I meet throughout life that just thank me for telling them that. I'm like, I'm not a big deal, but they're saying, you know what? No, I just appreciate having that connection. I'm like, okay, so now that I know I can just bring that little bit of cognitive joy to somebody's life just by sharing that fact, I think I kind of have to. So that's where I'm at now. But yeah, going to Young Turks, going into LA, going into that culture, learned a lot about production, learned a lot about multi-million-dollar sets, learned a lot about the culture of scapegoating and blaming others and and how some people are in the in culture and some people are not. And had I used granduncle's name, I'd be in the in culture, but I didn't do that. So I said, no, that's not interesting to me. I'm from a small town. My buddy James Ham up here in Sacramento, he needed an assistant director for a documentary they were doing called Small Market, Big Heart. And this was to keep the basketball team in town at the time because they were threatening to leave, professional basketball team. And so I moved back up to Sacramento to take that job. Turns out we didn't need to do the documentary. The fans rallied and they kept the team in town against the big multi-million-dollar forces trying to take the team away. It's a great story. And then from there, James, he ran the ESPN-focused Kings website. So he asked me, hey, come produce and shoot the games. I can't pay you, but you can own all your material. I was like, great. So this was 2012, 2013. I'm now covering NBA basketball. Who knew? And this is my favorite team growing up, right? So I'm now in the mix, in the locker room, talking to these guys, talking to Kobe, talking to LeBron, talking to all these guys. And that experience is so necessary because I'm like 21. And all my starstruckness just went out the window because, LeBron is very much a kid from Akron, Ohio. He just happens to be who he is because he works hard. But the celebrity aspects, he's just a dude. They're all just dudes. And it's very rare, honestly, behind the scenes to meet that diva personality in pro sports. When you do, nobody's about it.
One quick question there,
Yeah.
so you're interacting with these basketball icons, and obviously everyone's just we're all just people, right? Eventually, and comes down to, what was your most surprisingly authentic interaction with one of those guys?
Zach LaVine, one of my favorite players on the Bulls. This is why he's one of my favorite players. He pulls me aside one night after a game, and he's like, "Dude, I can't find a place to eat." Because in Sacramento, it's a sleepy town, so everything's closed at 9. And this is like 11 o'clock, and he's like, the Bulls, we need to find a place to eat. So he pulls me aside. Now, mind you, I'm one of the only Black media members in Sacramento at the time. So the players, there's a culture of who to trust and who not to trust for these kind of conversations. And so he pulls me aside, and we sit down for like 10 minutes and just chat it up. And I found out a lot about him. He's I think he had an intersection with foster youth or something like that. No, that's not true. That's not him. That was Willie. But that was a really interesting conversation. I learned a lot about Zach. I learned a lot about how these multimillionaire athletes view the world and how they spend their money. Most of these guys are feeding 50, 60 people off of their salary. And if they're smart like LeBron, they'll plug them into something useful, that actually helps generate that income. But a lot of them don't do that. They just kind of plug people in, and then 5 years after they retire, they're dried up. So that was Zach LaVine, to answer your question, was one of the most authentic connections I've had. Yeah.
When you were back then, were you already interested in linguistical frameworks there? Were you already thinking about these frameworks when you were in the locker room with these people? Was that something you had in mind?
Yeah. Okay. Let me preface that because I gave you a brief overview of my media career. My linguistics career, my dad in my foster foundation family, his name's Oscar. He's Honduran. So I grew up exposed to Spanish, but he never really taught us Spanish. And then I moved to Argentina when I was 20, and I lived there for about half the year. And that's when I fully learned Spanish. Now, by then I already had my minor in phonetic analysis. So I was already exploring the breakdowns of phonetics and how meaning is produced through these patterns of sounds, but I was not an advanced thinker in cognitive linguistics at all. That took about 2 years of focused research of Chomsky and a guy named George Lakoff at UC Berkeley, who was focusing on emotional embodiments. That journey was really 2016 and 2017. So that's a little bit later. Back in my first days of exposure to this NBA atmosphere, I don't think I really was approaching it with linguistic frame set. I really don't. I think that took a few years to develop. So I think it was 2015, 2016 where that really started to shift into that, synthesize into that part of that career.
Yeah, the linguistics piece is really, really interesting to me because it's foundational to storytelling. It's foundational to communication. What we'll learn here in a few minutes is it's also foundational to collaboration, right? Which will feed into all of the stuff that you're building and the pieces that you're using to build it. I was really interested to read kind of this idea of how intention and empathy work together as you as a writer or a communicator and me as a reader or a listener. Can you talk about how that works just fundamentally?
Yes, this is awesome. So language is a collaborative tool. I'm a proponent of the proto-world thesis. I first discovered this thesis through Chomsky, so I don't actually know which academic is the sponsor of the thesis. But Chomsky was talking about it in one of his books. And the proto-world thesis is essentially that language, the way that we use spoken language, was invented by a singular person. And this, to me, is the only thing that explains the diversity of languages that exist today. Over 6,000 languages spoken today, over 18,000 languages spoken over the last 1,000 years. So that explains proto-world is essentially, if you believe in the presentation of anthropology that humans have been on Earth for at least 250,000 years, and we only have about 25,000 years evidence of written language. There are some linguists, and I'm one of them, who assume that humans did not have a spoken language construct for perhaps tens of thousands of years. And we were very much like our cousins in the apes, grunting and using a grunt language and using a very rudimentary, point and make a sound language. Somebody at some point in time, one person, decided to evolve the tool. And instead of pointing and grunting, they looked at water and said, and they came up with what's called object phoneme association. So one of our earliest ancestors, looked at water and came up with a sound specifically for water. No longer a grunt. This was now, awa or agua or wa or water or any of it's the same word in so many languages. So that's a theory. It's one of the first words is water. It makes a lot of sense. And from there, the tooling of object phoneme association spread. So it spread according to the survival needs of the groups that it spread to. So that would explain the diversity of languages as they pop up, because by the time this object phoneme association travels halfway across the world, people are going to be using different phonemes for different things, for the same thing. So tree might be arbol, so that there's that to me explains the diversity of language. Now, I always caution all the etymologists in the world, none of us were there. So all of this is theory. And we can imagine how this might have worked based on how we know our cognition works. And so going back to what Jeremy was saying earlier, the proto-world thesis is a celebration of empathy because somebody else had to agree with the person that said water is water. And that's how the hive mind was established. So first person says water is water. Second person says, I agree. I'm going to start making that noise too. Third person says, what are you doing? Oh, water is water. Okay. And now rock is rock and tree is tree. And this slowly spreads through a society. The society, another generation, they spread. Another generation, they spread. New environments, new situations, new language. And that is how the diversity of language exploded from one idea, from one human or humanoid back in the day who decided to create object phoneme association. So that to me is what sentience is based on. We assume that we are the highest level of intelligence because we can communicate in this analog hive mind with object phoneme association. But in order to prove that we're sentient, we'd have to be able to occupy the cognition of literally every other creature on the planet, understand their survival needs, how they communicate, what their intention and empathy matrix is, to claim that we're sentient. So to me, it's a flawed presentation of our shared reality to even think that we're sentient at all. Because if you're keeping it a buck, when two birds are chirping at each other, we cannot prove that they're not doing the exact same thing that we're doing right now. We just don't have the context to observe any meaning. And if we remove ourselves from that position of empathy, which we do by saying we're sentient and that they're stupid, we remove ourselves from the position of empathizing with the meaning that the birds or the bees or the flowers and the trees might be able to communicate, we're not going to be able to receive any communications. So with I know that we, in our cognitive constructs, we might not be able to observe any of the patterns or the intentions of these other animals. But I position everybody. Our artificial intelligence models, those neural networks, they might be able to, if we train them to. So that we might actually be able to Dr. Dolittle up this world.
Hold on, I had a micro explosion in my neurons. Let's unpack that just for a quick second. And I want to translate all of this stuff into this model, this framework that you have for distributed assets and using communication and language to add incremental value and remuneration to all of that stuff. But so on the AI thing, like, let's explain that a little bit. Like, what could AI do again that we aren't able to perceive in other instances of reality, I guess?
So, for example, I've actually been working with ChatGPT to build a model for this. Ants use a pheromone language. I call it fart language because that's kind of what it is. And they communicate with smell and scent, which is what, right? What? That's what? So we as human beings will probably never be able to build a data set of their intentions and their survival needs because we can't interact with the chemical components of the meaning that they're trying to deliver. But if we set up a system where we are breaking down every single pheromone into chemical components, and we train the neural networks to understand how those chemical components work together in the ant's cognition, we might be able to replicate their exact intention and like their exact meaning delivery system. And if we are able to do that with a neural network that is assisting us, we really might be able to return communications to these creatures with chemistry, by creating our own fart language.
Well, we have a predisposition as humans to smell, don't we? I mean, it's the most potent memory manipulator we have, isn't it? I mean, there is some predisposition to it.
Yeah, I think what we would ask ourselves to do is try to get our observation of reality to be compatible with the pheromone meaning delivery of an ant. And I don't think that that's ever possible because we'd have to evolve to that. And I don't see a pathway.
Man, I smell, and I instigated this rabbit hole, but I'm smelling an alternate conversation that we could go on for quite a bit. Well, what I wanted to wrap this little piece up with is that almost like creating the objectivity of an ant's perception? Like, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. AI could probably do that if we as human beings can finally agree that is a possibility. Because if we say that we're sentient, we are denying that possibility.
Amazing. All right, I'm putting that on the board for further unpacking. But the thing that I wanted to give everyone a little bit of context in what your inputs to this creation of scalable intellectual property puzzles and what you're doing in the production world and applying these models to co-creation, right? We're talking about empathy and we're talking about intention, right? That's kind of at the root of how these puzzles come together and how people collaborate on them, right? So it's rooted in these amazing biological constructs. So super important to set that tone. But let's dive right in to scalable intellectual property puzzles and a framework for co-creation. Give us the rundown on that.
Awesome. You nailed it. Just like the language that we're using right now is an analog hive mind tool to deliver and create meaning. It only works because we're collaborating on this tool. The word tool only means tool because we agree that it means tool. And that's how every word works. So when we introduce prescription into that atmosphere, which is that form and format is required for the delivery of meaning, that needs to only exist in specific fields where it's progressive and relevant, like medicine. Medicine needs precise form and format for the delivery of meaning. Engineering, rocket science, all these places. And Twitter, I'm notorious for massive typos in my threads because my mind just moves at 1,000,000 miles an hour. So I spit something out, I read it back a day later, and it's riddled with typos, and I feel super embarrassed because I'm a linguist. It's like mocking my title. But I am also a descriptivist, so I understand that the role of the reader is to collaborate on the meaning, and if form and format aren't required, then the meaning is still there. And that's what Twitter's for. That's what these social apps are for. So when we are collaborating on meaning in intellectual property, we have to understand that every human being's time in that intellectual property is equal. I don't care about expertise. I don't care about, the impact of creative idea versus the impact of physical labor. Everybody's time is equal. There's only 24 hours a day. We all live by that same measurement. So building that into the meaning of our productions, everybody's time is equal. We have to find a way to represent that. And right now, just to preface for everybody, I'll give you this. Let's talk about what I understand from good old granduncle's experiences with Star Wars and a couple of other projects. So Mr. Earl Jones worked on A New Hope for, I think, about 2 weeks. Okay, he did his lines for New Hope in about 2 weeks of time, and he was paid for about 2 weeks of time, and he didn't want another dime. He didn't even want to be credited because he didn't think it was enough work to be credited for the film. Right? That's crazy. To me, this. I'm not trying to pull the man's chain or anything, but I always ask people, if you have any other person voicing that character, does the universe work? Is it anchored to be as solid of an experience as it is? Is that, I'm not trying to add too much weight to his impact because it was a team effort, but I do think that voice is part of the rug that ties the room together. And so then, the first movie experiences massive success. Empire comes and goes. Then you have Return of the Jedi, which made about 500 million net, but it was reported as a loss. And the way that they do that is that they take that net profit and they expense out all sorts of bullshit, marketing, distro, and they do this to this day. And they do this because people like James Earl Jones might have percentage points off that net profit. It might be 0.0001%, but that's a lot when we're talking about 500 million. But if that 500 million goes away, if it's expensed out and Return of the Jedi is reported at a loss, then nobody with percentage points off that net is earning them. So we need a transparent, trustless system for that to even work. That's the crux of the intellectual property puzzle, is that alone. So if we have these pieces that represent our labor tracked by the blockchain, and the net profit and the income of the collective work tracked by the blockchain, if there's anything fishy, dodgy coming out of those expenses, everybody's going to know. And now, granduncle's agent can chase down those extra dollars because it's right there. And on top of that, nobody's even going to do that. That just won't happen anymore. So
that's a big challenge in black box money in the music industry right now. This accounting and transparency is a big trouble in that world that people are looking to solve. Now, pointing back to what you said earlier, we're talking about value attribution, right, on the front end of things, and it gets a little tricky, right? Because like say the three of us are working on something. I'm going to use a musical reference, right? Because I'm a music guy, right? So I come with a melody, I come with kind of a song idea and just the general construct. Mark is a brilliant pedal steel player. He lands some pedal steel, and Kimani, you just add this layer that takes it into a whole new world from a production level, maybe an engineer, right? How do we figure it? So here's my question is, locking in the individual value on the front end can kind of do two things, right? if it's too complicated, the thing's never going to get built.
Sure.
And if it's not complicated enough to make sure, like, say or figuring out, like, maybe I was the seed for a lot of this and you guys were ancillary layers, right? How do we balance that with making it not too complicated to where nothing gets done, but where people get credited the right way? That's a
This
tough,
is awesome.
right?
It's built in the paper. I know the paper's rambling and dense. I'm encouraging the community to collect a few of our tokens and sponsor the rewrite, because it's been a harrowing 2 years, and it's on the chain. You guys can see it. You can see our market response on the chain. I built this into the paper. The paper is called the Scalable Intellectual Property Puzzle. That's the cognitive paradigm of taking a intellectual property that's normally owned by an individual or a company and defining it in its only tangible existence as a puzzle. So, the puzzle's here. So that means that the property does not exist unless it's a puzzle with a hard cap of pieces. So that's the first paradigm shift that we have to adopt as entrepreneurs and as creatives, and that when we go create that album, when we go create that film or that season of television, that's not one asset anymore. That is a collaborative puzzle with a fixed amount of pieces, and we can define and claim that using a deed, and we can define and claim that using simple property claim law. And I want to be clear, I'm not a lawyer. This is not legal advice. Always refer to counsel. But we can claim intellectual property using traditional property claim law in the United States using the blockchain. Property claim law in the United States requires fixed points with measurable distances and description. So
this is physical property you're talking about.
Yeah, but
translated.
The blockchain. Yeah, exactly. So I'm Afro-Indigenous, and my Indigenous blood, James Earl Jones shares Indigenous blood. We have the same background there. I'm Kaw Nation, which is, this is a fun story. It'll only take a second. The Kaw people, that's the name of the nation, the Kaw people. But when the French interacted with the Kaw people, they called them the Kansaw people. So back in the 1700s, le was not the colloquial term for the, it was aw, A-U-X. So aw Kansaw is the Kansaw. And then when the English interacted with the Kaw people, they used the French name, and they had their, by then they had the little accent going, the Midwest Southern accent. And so all Kansaw became the Kansas. So we got Kansas and Arkansas. We got two states named after our people and less than 5,000 people. Anyway, yeah, so from an Indigenous perspective, nobody can claim land. It's just complete bullshit. It's just ridiculous. Basically, the Indigenous perspective is that colonization was forced import of the feudal system, and that's where we're at. So the idea of planting flags, tying a string from flag to flag and saying this is mine is sort of a ludicrous idea in the Indigenous mindset. But whatever, that's the law, okay? So we can't do that now. I can't go out into the forest and plant my flags and claim land. All of it's claimed. But on the blockchain, I can plant a flag by creating a non-fungible token. That's a fixed point. I can plant another flag by creating another non-fungible token. It's another fixed point. They have a measurable distance because they're two different serial numbers. I can claim property, digital property on the blockchain now, just using property claim law. Now I describe that property to say, hey, this is my plot of land. When I describe that property, I'm not describing it as one thing. This is a collaborative puzzle, and this is exactly how it works. So to answer Jeremy's question about value assurance, the breakdown in terms of the top side labor, that's built into the paper. I believe it works for the music industry as well, but keep in mind it's all tooled for film and television production. But I'll tool it for music. A musician has the entire body of their work, the discography. And I don't know how exactly it works in music when you sign with a record label, but I do know that it's pretty all-encompassing, right? And they own a certain amount of your work for a certain amount of time. And I'm saying let's transact the business a little bit differently. Let's not do that. We don't need first look deals. We don't need these extended deals. We can actually grassroots every project we want. So instead of saying, here's an all-encompassing block of my music for a certain amount of time, record company that may include 10 or 5 or 10 albums, I'm gonna do one album at a time. I'm gonna set a deed out for my cognitive output in music that claims all of my cognitive and physical output in music as my intellectual property, forthwith, not transactable. Now, in that deed to my overall intellectual property, I will say that I'm going to transact individual albums of material out from this overall pool of property. Each album is now an intellectual property puzzle. So to answer Jeremy's question, it depends on how you as the artist want to break that down. If you want to just apply thorough LMO structure, it's built in. LMO structure is I as the artist own 35% of this album, and I'm going to receive 35% of the net profit. The production platform will own 35% of the album and receive 35% of the net profit. The labor, the bands, the producers, the engineers, we'll share 20% of the album. And we'll do that at Project Wrap because we're going to measure everybody's time against the liability and expertise they've provided to the project. So if you want to pool engineers into 5% and you want to pool bandmates into the other 15%, you can do that. And at Project Wrap, you'll know, okay, we have had 5 engineers. That engineer worked for 2 weeks. This engineer worked for a month. This engineer worked for another week. You pool their time together. You can do it in 6-hour blocks or 8-hour blocks, however you want to do it. And now you'll know exactly the impact of time versus that 5%.
It's yeah, just not to jump on you there. There's 2 pieces to the puzzle. 2 pieces to the puzzle. One is kind of the IP. So I'm gonna use a different example. This is because this is more aligned with the film and television production, right? So Mark has a story. Story is great. Maybe he has a script together to develop that story. As we take that story as the original IP, that story needs resources, right? It needs to get talent attached. It needs to have a DP. It needs to have color correction. It needs to have music and all of these pieces and parts. Would that fold into this labor pool that you're referring to in the paper? Is that?
Yeah. In fact, the flagship property I put together on, it's very transparent. It's called Press Pass Season 1. This is a $27 million TV show I put together on this. So all the labor is built in. We have a breakdown of 8% of the work product being distributed. Now, keep in mind, I have Press Pass All Access. That's the intellectual property franchise. That's all potential storytelling related to the original idea. That's mine. I'm not selling that. And so traditionally, to get involved with like a big studio, I would have to sell that. I'd sign a first look deal against that. The company would take all potential storytelling related to that, and I'm pretty new. Like, they're not going to pay me a lot of money for that. They're going to pay me $90,000 to $120,000 a year for a 3-year deal. And that's even if I get in the right room and I have to flex my granduncle's name to do that. So you know what I'm saying? So instead of doing that, I'm saying, no, my franchise is mine. Season 1 is a puzzle. It's not a singular asset. It's a puzzle of 5,309,160 pieces. 90% of those pieces are proof of labor pieces. So they're all the same piece, but there's enough additions in that pool to represent all the labor that's going into Season 1 of Press Pass. So out of that 90%, that's where my consideration comes out as the showrunner and IP creator. That's where Let Me Out Productions consideration comes out as primary platform. I'm at 30%. LMO's at 35%. Our labor force is about 300 full-timers, potentially 600 to 700 with background actors. That's coming out of 20%. They share 20%. And then we have 10% of the puzzle left over in 2 exclusive audience collaboration chips. So it's literally a piece of the intellectual property. It's not an investment contract. There is no rewards for purchasing this piece and holding it passively. This is a collaborative chip in the intellectual property itself. So for Press Pass, these chips are, there's 2 different versions of the chip. The first chip is you get to create a notable fan or an ecosystem professional in the lore of this fictional sports documentary we're doing. So that's a ticket to a role play experience of 14 to 21 hours of role play in a month. And the role play is a community role play. Everybody's pretending to be a part of this professional basketball franchise. It's a really fun experience. And everything that happens in that month of role play is canon for the sports documentary to use and refer to. Then the people that participate in the role play go and create memes from the canon. They can go film memes, pretend, hey, I'm back in 1954 and I'm, a shoe shiner on the court side. They can go film a meme about that. The documentary that we're shooting licenses the memes for use from that pool. So the memes will also be available as digital merchandising for the show. So every single bit of the collaboration has a market value merit across from it that could potentially reward the collaborator for their work, but there is no passive holding. So that's the main thing with the intellectual property puzzle. It's a way to sell collaboration without selling investment. So without selling investment contracts. That was the number one thing that we were concerned about moving into the blockchain in early 2021. Before, we launched LMO a month before Bored Apes came out. So back then, nobody knew a thing. There was no fundamental use case on the blockchain for how the market was going to work. And honestly, I think the cartoon cult thing was a huge distraction. I think this is actually the model that, well, frankly, once the unions in showbiz get a hold of a 20% work product distribution, it's done. It's done. We're talking about the writers getting 4 to 8% of the net profit of a show or a film on average. That ends the strike today if they were to employ the model. The big money, their concern is 20%, right? We're giving 20% of the IP away to labor. That's coming out of our net. And I'm telling them you're going to make 150% of what you're making today by employing this model because, first of all, the collaboration ships to the consumers offer 2 new revenue streams that are kind of unfathomable in what they could bring in. And second, when I put my value into that collaborative chip, that's a value assured relationship. I know I'm buying a piece of the property, one part of the property, and I'm sponsoring 2 parts to a laborer. I'm sponsoring 3 parts to the original creator. I'm sponsoring 3.5 parts to the platform. And then in showbiz, we do a half part to unions because we want a monthly CBA audit on set. So we don't have anything that happens like on Rust, with Alec Baldwin. So I love CBA. I'm a laborer. I love, so I want to help that continue. I don't know how it would work if with the union distribution in music, but on showbiz that's the value assurance. So every one part that comes out of the collaborative pool sponsors the proof of labor for labor, creator, platform, and union value. And now it's just a ticket to an experience, just like anything else. I bought a $20 ticket to 21 hours of role play over a month, where I get to pretend to be a fan, a professional, a player, or a coach for a pro basketball team. And everything that I contribute in that role play is canon for the sports documentary to build off of. So this is the flagship Film 3 project. We launched this in May of 2021, the first TV show on the blockchain. Now, the ticket is a meme. Its ticket is exactly what we're supposed to do. You're supposed to create a character, role play as the character, and then film a meme for the show. My character I did in real time on the actual sidelines of pro basketball. Mind you, the team was really bad. And about 5 years into my career, I had a moment where I said, okay, my careers, for better or worse, sort of attached to the quality of the team. And they're not going anywhere. They're not going to go anywhere because there's a culture here in the press and in the team environment where they just weren't going to be good for a while. And I knew that. So I said, the team next door, this is 2015, 2016, they're winning championships, the Golden State Warriors. So I'm saying I'm an hour away. I'm covering the worst team of all time. Like they barely got there, but they did set the record for the worst team in history. And I immediately said, I can view this as pathetic and sad. Like the media culture kind of wants you to view yourself if you're not in the right opportunities. Or I can view it as it is. This is sitcom material. This is hilarious. Like,
well, you have an engaged fan base. If the fan base was able to keep the team there, there's an engaged fan base, whether they're good or bad, right? So there's your audience.
Yeah, we have to celebrate that. That's essentially why I launched the project to begin with, was to celebrate the fan culture and the camaraderie, amongst all the down bad of the team. And it ended up spawning a whole world of fictional basketball teams with mixed gender rosters going all the way back to 1939. And so it's very much like anybody can step in, role play a character, have a blast. If you ever wanted to be a pro athlete, now's the time.
That's cool. I think it's a lot of the stuff, obviously, that you're doing is super interesting. We haven't had the time to get super down into the weeds of a lot of stuff, and we're actually getting pretty close to needing to wrap up. But I want to want to, and Mark, obviously you may have some thoughts too. I feel like I've been commandeering the conversation a little bit, but the thing about it, I mean, I've read the paper. I understand the constructs. I understand what it took to build those constructs in a different way. Is the next phase of this thinking about trying to simplify it for people that are more in traditional production, traditional audience? Because I get it, but I know this stuff really, really well. What are you finding there?
It's going to have to be an experience thing. I think it's such a hard paradigm shift, especially in our industry where these intellectual property assets are really transacted as one thing. I really encourage the producers behind the scenes that have run the numbers and have come to the same conclusions I have. The apprehension is what's going to happen if we empower our labor force. And I'll tell them what's going to happen. You're going to have all the old curmudgeons retire, and no shade to them. I've been a line producer and an AD for 16 years. The set quality will improve if you get the people that don't want to be there out of there. And there's people that want to retire that have to work. And so let's get them retired. That's the number one thing. Number two, everybody who knows that they're getting paid in work product at the end of the set on top of their normal topside salary, you won't have the issues that people have. I mean, right now we have people coming off multi-million-dollar projects, $200 million projects, and scrambling for work. They're out of money in a month. It's embarrassing. It's just embarrassing. It happened to a couple of my friends. I won't say the property, but it was a major blockbuster. All right, released last spring, and I had 20, 30 friends that worked on that property that 3 weeks after the wrap, they were scrambling for work. And it's just not appropriate. That thing made $1.6 billion. $1.6 billion. So if we take 20% and distribute it to the 6,000 people that put together that work, first of all, the companies that you're not going to miss that, because if it made 1.2 billion, you'd be happy, be thrilled. So you're not going to miss that. And all the 6,000 people that the A-listers end up with multiple millions of dollars on their residuals, way more than they would traditionally get. On the scalable intellectual property puzzle for Black Panther 2018, Chadwick Boseman would have made double his residuals. So that would have he made about 2.8 million, I think, in residuals. He would have made just a hair under 6 million in residuals. That
would be a really interesting example to look at an old blockbuster and put it through the model, like in a very clear, demonstrable way. If you have links to that, that'd be great.
I have a calculator. I don't know why I didn't send you this, Jeremy. I have a calculator that I put together, a spreadsheet calculator. Anybody can import it. You put your budget in, and then you put your oh wait, this is not the right one. And then you put the amount of puzzle pieces you want in your puzzle, and it'll automatically adjust the breakdown. Now, my LMO structure is a very simplistic breakdown. It has a proof of labor piece and 2 audience collaboration pieces. So this can get super complicated. You can have 50 different styles of audience collaboration pieces, different styles of proof of labor pieces, all of that. So I try to keep it as simple as possible just for the initial presentation. We're no longer going to transact the intellectual property as one asset. We're not going to transact the franchise. We're going to transact each asset as it's distributed. So that means when you're doing a television show, you keep your show, but you take season 1 and that's now a collaborative puzzle. You sell 10% of the pieces to audience collaborators for, I mean, really the tickets are about $20 to $40. It's not any more than traditional storytelling involvement. But now they actually have a piece of the property that they can sell to somebody else. Now it's usually a limited relationship, and people need to understand that when you're buying a ticket to something, it's just exactly the same market mechanic as buying a sports ticket. If the team's not good, you're not going to be able to sell that ticket to somebody else. So that's not an investment contract. It's a risk. There's a risk inherent in grabbing that piece, in grabbing that. So to me, the entire NFT sector needs to be reshaped to that market mechanic. When you're grabbing these things, inherently, unless there's a fun experience across from it, it's going to be valueless.
I totally agree with that. And I think, Mark, we've talked a lot about with some of our previous guests and how a lot of this needs to be experienced, right? To kind of understand how, and we have a lot of production people that tend to be on this call. I see Mark Calamia in the chat there. He's been in production for years. It'd be interesting to see some of our production people take this model, take this calculator that we can get and post in show notes and all of that, and give it a try. It's just an alternate philosophy. Okay,
yeah,
it's in the chat.
It goes back a little bit to what Inda Full was saying last week in regards to music. And I was disruptor. You need somebody to come in who's going to disrupt their own company, their own production company, in this sense, to like almost kind of like gamble on their own company to do something disruptive. And like I was reading during the writers' strikes, and I won't mention the production company, but the CEO of that company was taking like more that, I mean, we all know that the CEO employee pay ratio is massively out of kilter across industries. But in Hollywood, it's even more pronounced, whereby the CEO is taking 300, 400, 500 times more than the writers in the writing room creating the IP in the first place. And it's so unbelievable. It's like, it's bad enough in normal society, but in Hollywood, it's even more pronounced. And this is a way to
just fix
that.
math, just fix hard math. And the funny thing is, the people at the top, they're still going to make buku money. They're still going to make an incredible amount of money, because now you're talking about, let me say a name that's safe to say, Peacock, right? They're friends of mine. Instead of Peacock risking $25 million on press pass, we're going to get it done off $20 and $50 tickets. That's where the budget's coming from, and it facilitates a role play experience, which gives us our lore, that gives us our canon, which is awesome. It's a symbiosis. And now we go film the sports mockumentary off of that role play canon. Now, instead of Peacock picking up the $25 million risk, we're selling distribution rights to season 1. We do 16 distribution gates, and they are in total, if they wanted exclusive, it would cost 133% cost of production. That's the way it's supposed to be 125 to 133% markup for exclusive. So that means that if we get that exclusive deal, we're in the black. And we've already made about 3 or 4 million net profit, which immediately 20%, right, goes to our team. Amazing, amazing. So our lead performer, Luke Baratz, you might have heard of, he would be immediately off of an exclusive distribution deal, sitting on vacation, like, a few years of vacation money kind of thing. So the risk is gone. If Peacock wanted to take a flyer on Press Pass and just pick up one of the 16 distribution gates, we do a bonding curve. The first 8 distribution gates are available for, in total, 25% of the exclusive. The next 4 gates are available in total for 25% exclusive, and then the last 4 gates are available for in total 50% exclusive. This gives us a zeitgeist measurement, because my theory is if you can get 3 of those cheap distribution gates out, and you can limit the syndication window. So you say, hey, if you have distribution of our property, this is meant for OTT distributors like Twitch streamers, YouTubers. You could actually airdrop a distribution token to them and say, hey, all of y'all, you're limited to distributing this content on a 6-hour window on a Thursday afternoon. So that means you're on 3 or 4 different channels. These people are getting 60 to 400,000 viewers live. Watching them do nothing for 6 hours, okay? Just clicking around the internet. That's their audience. So you're talking about putting a half-hour show where the guy can go grab a bite? Yeah, they're going to do it. They're going to buy those rights. And then within the distribution deal, you're collecting advertisement revenues from the actual stream. You're collecting bumpers for discussion. And now that's for the distributor, for the YouTuber, the Twitch streamer, they now have a piece of the distribution rights they can trade to the next person. And what'll happen is you'll have your Press Pass will be on 3 or 4 streamers. We're going to be getting 2 or 3 million views every episode. And Netflix and Hulu and all these bigger companies will have to pick up the other distribution gates, because they're saying, well, we don't want to miss out on this content. We don't want to miss out on this material. They might even go back and collect the other distribution gates from the streamers to have that exclusive set. So, and then each distribution gate's producing 14 revenue streams for both the distributor and Let Me Out Productions. So it's what we're talking about, guys, is this is going to be triggered by fiduciary obligations. I designed it to be triggered by fiduciary obligations. It's socialized work product to 20% of the work product, defined in the actual intellectual property itself. The puzzle pieces have to be artistically unique collectibles on the blockchain. They can't facilitate any market guarantees in the collectible itself. So we used a marketplace contract to provide that third-party asset definition. We were counter-marketed on that, as we talked about, but it doesn't matter. And then they can plug those collectibles into a layer 2 system that facilitates the guarantees in the puzzle. So I just put up on the calculator, it's called the LMO Structure Abacus model. And I put in a simple little $50,000 budget for an album, for some studio time, Jeremy. And we're going to do 100,000 pieces to this intellectual property puzzle. So that means 10,000 pieces are available to audience collaborators. We're going to do 9,000 of a version 1 collectible and 1,000 of an exclusive version 2. The version 1 collectible costs $5. So I don't know what the collaboration is across from that. Maybe you buy it and I get to submit a word that you're going to use in a song in your album. It could be something that simple, right? So I buy it and then I'm looking to listen to the album. Oh, that's my word. That's my word. Yeah, and then great. So I believe you could probably find 9,000 people that would do that. And then you have 1,000 tickets for $12 each. I don't know, maybe maybe it's a competitive album cover design or something like that. Yep. Or everybody submits a little square and that's the album cover. It's a collage of those 1,000 people's artwork. There's ways to build a collaborative experience across from any intellectual property that you're looking to launch and looking to publicly build. And this is the value assurance model. So instead of GoFundMe, where there is no value assurance, or instead of the way the NFT market works right now, where there honestly is no value assurance because the properties are not defined. That's the main thing that's the main issue I have. When I go look at a collection or a project, there's no deed, there's no explicit, this is what we're going to do at 500,000, this is what we're going to do at 1.5 million. We have all that. We've had all that for years. But unfortunately, in this weird society, people love consumability and they don't. So now I think the contrast is important. We've had a lot of fast moving projects in NFTs. Some of them have rewarded the holders, but a lot of them did not provide value assurance because there wasn't there wasn't that breakdown. Here we have I'm buying a part of this property, and that means 2 parts go to labor, 3 parts to creator, 3.5 parts to platform, half part to union. Or in music, it would be 3.5 parts to creator, 3.5 parts to platform. I don't think you'd have union consideration there. But anyway, I'm on the calculator here. I put 50,000 in, 100,000 pieces. I'm looking at A23 approximate USD cost of the version 1 collectibles, $4.30. The approximate cost of the version 2 collectibles, $11.33. I was in the middle of adjusting this document to fit the music industry, but we have, let's put the approximate number of project personnel on this album at 25. Okay. So that means the average token distribution per person for working on the puzzle is 4,000, which means that each person owns 0.04% of the album, which means if that album goes on to make any net profit at all, that's the breakdown of distribution. That net profit goes into a treasury, and that treasury pays out to the puzzle pieces and the registered wallets. They do have to be registered to the project as the laborer, because if they sell that collectible to somebody else, they can't facilitate the payout.
This example has been amazing. I think we could dig on this for quite a bit longer, but we are definitely short on time and need to wrap up. But I would, in conclude, thanks for being here. I look forward to watching all the stuff that you're doing, and I encourage the production people that are listening to this episode to get in and look at the show notes and try this stuff out and see how it works. This is all experiment iteration. It's rooted in a lot of really cool things in storytelling, linguistics, and collaboration. So, those are my final notes and thoughts. Kimani, thanks for being here. Mark, anything on your side? Quick wrap up.
My mind is kind of blown. I need to reread the white paper because it's a very vital ingredient with IP, and it's something that we haven't spoken about, the legality of getting the money to the right people, getting the profits to the right people at the right time. And I think this is a possible solution to making it fairer for the people who create and work on IP.
Amazing. Awesome, guys. Thanks so much for the time in the chat. Everyone listening, thanks for checking it out. www.thinkingonpaper.xyz to check out other episodes and all the other things we're doing. We'll see you next Thursday. Take it easy.